It has been a couple of months since my last video, and I'll be trying my best to go over the stuff that I did during Sprint 3 and trying to ignore what I'm currently working on in Sprint 4, because there are a few things that I have started working on that I will just do in another video. Now, my game, I'd say, by the time of when December started, I was fairly confident while also cautious, as I had a problem with my VHS filter. So I added in this new package called the high definition render pipeline, which allows my game to essentially be more graphic heavy. It's commonly used in Unity games for games that are built for PC. Now, when I did this, I had to do a lot of things. For instance, I had to change many of my materials to work. If I go onto my living room, many of my materials had this default uh, material to them, but with the high definition render pipeline, I had to change them to this new HDRP versions. And while for now I've kept naming them simple, I have for now made it so that all my materials and such are sorted out. If I were to just turn off my lighting, you can see everything that I've got in my living room. Now it's all working once again, just like the previous video. Now, something I discovered about fixing my VHS filter was in January. I had been given a chance to do a placement test, and during my time of doing such, I discovered that my VHS filter that I have on the Unity Asset Store has a version dedicated to HDRP. And because of that, well, I've decided that I go back onto my project in January and I tried that one out. And turns out it works, though was a bit confusing at first to get used to. There were a couple of aspects with how to get it to work that was confusing to me at first, because initially I thought it'd be as simple as grabbing access to the camera and giving it the VHS filter script. Turns out that's not exactly how HDRP's version works. HDRP's version requires the use of a custom pass or a volume. Now, I go ahead and in my settings, there was this section for getting my VHS filter to work. Now, I don't exactly know where it is now, but if I do find it, I will show it in a future video. But there was this section where I could add um, custom custom passes into my HDRP, and that's how I got the VHS linked to it. And because of that, I was able to add the override of my VHS Pro and create what it is now. It is a bit different from my last recording. I had to make a couple of changes that I felt were a bit better, but overall, it could be altered in any way in the future to make it im- like um much more improved, or in any other way. Now, if I go into my main menu, we of course have my variant manager. Now, I did mention in my sprint that my variant manager will be one of the main things that I'd work on, as seen here. In the variant manager, there were a few issues that I had to, of course, deal with. Where, for instance, sometimes lights wouldn't get affected, and it required me just altering my code, uh, in a sense, to just make it actually affect the lighting and such in my game. I also, in general, added more stuff to be affected. For instance, I had changed my goal script. If I go over to here, I had changed my goal script to essentially be changed in a script. For example, if I were to show you, in my script, we have this static string. This here is what gets loaded. As you can see here, it loads the scene of level loading. Now, this will get affected within my variant manager, as seen here. It links towards the goal and grabs level loading. And with each variant, it will affect that name. This allows me to change the goal of my 2D game without making new scenes or creating new goals. As initially, I did have it to just create and destroy a new door. But I found that this way is more effective because it just allows me to just create one door and change it within code. And of course, the same old stuff about how it increments. But I will go over all my scripts in a future video, as there is a lot of explaining that I need to do. I need to add comments to my scripts to make it much easier for everyone to understand, and I'll show them when I have that. But if I were to go back, we have other aspects of assets changing from variants, which in a sense that kind of works. It's just not the way that I initially wanted it to do. Now, for now, my scenes for 3D sections will be different. Will be different scenes. That's because the whole levels geometry need to change in this small spot. I could, in the future, have a look into making a way to change it and, of course, keeping it as one scene. But I also have my VHS filter change in every 3D section, which is another aspect that I'm just unsure at the moment how I will change. But again, I can research into this and see if I could do it in the future. As of now, my main goal is to make sure my game is done. The UI, main menu, and pause mechanics have been improved, as well as my file management system. If I were to go on to my main menu, we can see that now we have an options. And with this, it allows us to change our graphics resolution, our graphics settings, our volume, and if it's full screen. Now, my game does not have audio just yet, so this aspect will have to be changed in the future. And there are some minor little tweaks I can do. For instance, the text issue that happens at the later sections. But again, that'll be a problem for me to sort out at another time. If I were to hit play, we of course can access the game, where, as you can see, you can finally see what the VHS filter looks like. And we have a pause menu. This system is dealt by pressing escape or by pressing P. And you can press P again to play the game, or hit resume. You can also hit menu to go back to main menu, and you can press the quit button to quit your game. But another thing that's not the best, because you have to do this in every scene for now, is the mouse sensitivity. You can adjust it so that your mouse sensitivity is more sensitive or weaker, of course. And another issue I had was that when my characters died, or whenever I want to go back to main menu, my variant manager system, of course, didn't reset. And that was problematic, so I'll explain in the future sprint how I solved that, because that was a thing I sorted out recently. But as of now, we can of course see the game. We can see how it plays. If the recording is a bit choppy, that's likely because of my OBS settings. I apologize for that. Another aspect that I had changed is the weight of my enemies. No longer can you be pushing them. They push you. My 3D levels. Now in my previous video, this was very bare bones. I had only just made the level and sorted out the simple player movement. Now, as you can see, there is a lot more. One aspect I'm going to just quickly go over, but I'll explain in the future, is that I had to alter my player movement system. That is because initially there was the problem where when my character were to be looking down or up, they wouldn't move, or the higher they go, the slower they move forward. That was because my character's movement was based on my character's forward, meaning if you were looking up, then that would be forward. So I had to alter my movement system completely, and it's now working considerably better, of course. Other aspects that I've now added. We have now got a gun for the 3D sections. This allows us to shoot the enemies, of course, whenever their invulnerability goes through and they get hit by 3 times. Another thing is now you can drop your gun. Now, there was initially a problem with this, in that when you were to drop your gun, it would mess up its drop location completely. For instance, height would never be a factor, and sometimes it would mess up because of the gun that's usually... I'm unsure if it's still there, but there was a gun behind this wall to act as a reference that a gun exists. And that, I think, caused some of the problems as to where the gun would respawn. For instance, if I was standing up here, the gun would spawn underneath. But now this problem is more fixed. There's only a few slight problems. For instance, if I were to look at the wall here and then do it, you can see that it does have the problem. I could change that, but for now, it's not the biggest issue. It's going to be very rare, and it's not like the gun is the most important aspect in my 3D game. It's more of a extra bonus, which I'll, of course, make it easier to know that there's a gun there, because when you spawn, you face this way, and the gun's like over there. Other aspects, of course, the texturing, modeling, and all that stuff, there isn't really such for the gun and the bullets, as you could tell by its missing textures. But I'll deal with the model stuff and art stuff real soon. I think that'll be one of the next aspects that I'm going to work on besides what I'm currently working on in Sprint 4. What you saw earlier was an enemy, and if I were to go and collect the 3D key, which activates the door, we could see that the enemies wander around. And if you're caught within their line of sight, which is hard to tell at first, but it's this, if you're in their line of sight, then they will begin chasing you. And if they get in contact with you, of course, you'll sustain damage. And of course, if you shoot them, they'll flash red, take moments of damage and invulnerability, and if you hit them 3 times, they die, just like the game. Of course, similar things happen that when you get hit, you get a effect where your camera likes to blink forward a tiny bit, and your camera shakes color red. If I were to just quickly make it to the end here before I die. You finally get to see here what I meant by my variant manager affecting my previous levels. We've loaded into the previous level, and as you can see, the lights are off. But not only that, but in my 2D game, of course, if I were to go over here, we now have this red circle. Now, of course, the art isn't there, but what that red circle represents is the glitch area. If you're inside the glitch area, you will sustain temporary damage over time. That's how that one works. And if I were to just go over my sprint, we can, of course, mention these aspects. So, of course, we have the 3D level, which I've shown. We have the main menu, which I showed, and the variants, which, as you progress through the game, you will, of course, be facing across the level of the 3D, 2D, 3D, 2D, 3D, 2D. But as you can see, things are different. That's because, for now at least only, the VHS filter will, of course, be adjusted, thanks to it being a new scene. And in the final variant of this wall will have cracked open. This then allows players to, of course, go through the wall, if they so decide to. If I were to just continue playing for one last time, you can see there are more red circles strewn about the level. And as we continue all along, once we make it to the end, we now get the final variant. I do apologize if the OBS is lagging in this quick example, but anyway, if you were to continue through the game and just go to that end on this scene, then you will get the bad, boring ending where the game will just question why did you not continue and explore. If you decide to go through the currently unfinished section, you will reach what is my Sprint 4 work, which I will pause here. So overall, even with my current busy schedule during January of doing collab and my placement test, I still did some relatively decent work on my project. Of course, I'm going to be uploading a bit more often, and I'm going to definitely be updating a one-sheet document to go over everything in my game in terms of its planned cut, and implemented features. And that'll be all for today's video. I do apologize that this is a long one, but this is long overdue, and I will of course do a video on my next sprint very soon.